Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Beyond Horizons. Apologies for the brief exam period hiatus. I was very busy and didn't have a lot of time to play the game, but now I do and we're back. And we're here on the surface of Minmus testing out the Harvest Science Lander. This is our scientific harvesting vessel, as the name might suggest, which is destined for the surface of Dres. But in order to make sure all the systems are working properly, we're giving it a test on Minmus because there's still science to be gained here as well. Now you can see there the main selling point of this lander is those fancy arms with the deployable drones on them. I say drones, they're not movable, they are completely static, but the idea is that we'll land in different biomes, drop one of these off, and it can continue to run experiments even after the Kerbals leave. Which is incredibly useful because some of these experiments take a long time to run on account of Kerbalism changing how science works. So something like the seismometer takes a couple weeks to run, and the gravitometer actually takes 90 days, and we don't really want the Kerbals hanging around in the same spot for that long. So yeah, I decided we'll have these little deployable probes that we can leave behind, and they can just gather the science while the Kerbals move on to the next location. On top of the deployable drones, we also have these surface experiments, which Jibbery is currently setting up now. We only have 3 sets of these, so we have to be a little bit more conservative about where we put these, but it just helps us get an extra bit of science. Now, when we actually run the harvest mission on Dres, we will need 3 Kerbals here, 1 pilot obviously to fly it. The engineer can make the power generators produce more power than normal, and a scientist can make the experiments generate more science than normal. So we're going to want 1 of each to set up the experiments to maximize the amount of both power and science that these setups are able to produce. Now, as it stands, the main ship itself doesn't really have any of the other experiments. It's got a materials bay as well as a mystery goo containment unit, as well as some, storage modules and other, I think, surface experiments, but none that really generate much science. I think I'm going to change that because there's more than 6 biomes on Dres, so yeah, we obviously want to get as much science as possible, so the more experiments we can have, the better. But yeah, it's shaping up to already be a very good lander, and we're already getting some bits of science here on Minmus that we have previously missed. And there we are, stowing the probes away, getting ready for another jaunt across the surface. But we will check back in with this mission in a little bit because we've got some exciting things to be looking at in the meantime. So even though our primary focus is on our crewed mission to Dres, we also have a transfer window to Jool coming up, and I want to make full use of it. So here we are testing Seamoth, which is going to be our Laythe seaplane, designed to go around the oceans of Laythe and picking up as much science as possible. You can see there, I try to use some of these air intakes as flotation devices, but they don't work particularly well. So it does kind of just, sink in the water a little bit, but it's fine enough. We also have these VTOL engines strapped to the wings, and the reason for that is the scatterer mod, I think, is what creates these really nice ocean textures, but it also provides waves, which makes it very hard to land and take off on the water horizontally. And so I thought some VTOL capabilities would probably serve us quite well here. But yeah, it's a fun little plane to fly around. It's a little unwieldy, especially in its VTOL mode, but yeah, I had a lot of fun building and flying this thing, so I think it'll be really cool once it gets out to Laythe. You can see there, we've actually got a scanning arm tucked under the left wing there. I figured we are going to be landing on some land, and so maybe if we can try and get close to some surface features, we can give them a scan. If not, it's not a big deal. It's not particularly heavy and doesn't really affect the aerodynamics. Not that we're going fast enough to have to worry too much about aerodynamics, but with any luck, we can use it to just eke out a little bit more science. I know I'm saying this a lot, but the new slow progression tech tree that we've got requires a lot of science points, and so I really need to think about how we can maximize the amount we can collect. Anyway, here we are bringing it in for a landing on the little island close to the KSC. I thought about landing it on the little abandoned runway, but I thought, no, we're not going to be landing on anything like a runway in Laythe. So let's try it on some steep, uneven terrain and see how it fares. Yeah, you can see here I'm struggling a little bit with the VTOL side of things. I did think about putting like a probe core at the top, facing upwards, so that we could put it in like a landing orientation, but I actually think that confuses me more because it is a plane, and so I want to try and fly it like a plane. And yeah, so here we are putting it down rather abruptly, not too gently, but luckily in one piece. And yeah, I think that's it for the Seamoth. We're going to get it strapped to a transfer vessel with some other bits and pieces, and we'll send it off to Jool soon. I say soon, we're actually beginning construction of the interplanetary vessel right away, and we're starting with the main housing unit for all the different probes of what will be dubbed the IPV Demeter II. Yeah, so this vessel will be the successor to Demeter, which we launched in Season 1. It was a probe that went around the Julian system and collected lots of science from the orbital space around all of its moons. So as I quickly mentioned, this is going to be the housing unit for the different probes that we want to send there. I figured if we're going out to Jool, we want to land on a few of the moons. I didn't want to necessarily land on all of them, because then I'd have to end up packing a load of probes, which I didn't really want to do. So we're going to be landing on Val, Laythe, obviously, as we saw with the Seamoth, maybe Bop or Pol, I'm not sure which one yet, but we're also going to be landing on Tylo, which is one of those destinations that I have previously shied away from in past due to how difficult it is to land on Tylo. If you don't know, it's a very high gravity moon with no atmosphere, so I think it has the same gravity as Kerbin, which makes it very difficult to land on when there's no atmosphere. Anyway, during launch, I didn't like this rocket. It's a very dinky little thing, but we ran into a little bit of a problem. So that interstage there has, I think, 7 of the swivel engines. And here we are coming up to main engine cutout. And we're going to activate the engines on the interstage. But that is when disaster struck. Yeah, so what happened there was I didn't make the interstage fairing long enough, and so when we separated the stages and the two parts of the rocket became separate, they clipped into each other and most of our engines exploded. Luckily, 2 of them survived, one of the outside engines and our central one, and we were very lucky to have the central one survive, so I switched off the outside engine because that was, of course, going to induce a torque and spin us off axis. And we had to complete the rest of the burn on the central one. If that one hadn't survived, that would have been a mission failure. But no, luckily we could limp on to orbit with just that one swivel engine. And we didn't really have a problem. It was a bit slow and we had to pitch up quite a lot to make that work. But as you can see from the design here, this rocket was completely over-spec'd. The only reason we had a rocket this big was because of the size of what we were launching, not necessarily the mass of it. It's actually quite lightweight. So the one swivel engine was enough to get us into orbit, and there we are. This is the housing unit. This is where we're going to be attaching all of our probes that we're going to be dropping onto the different moons of Jool, as well as those 2 little communication satellites that we'll deploy once we're out there, just to make sure that we've always got communication with our probes. Once we're safely in orbit, we detach the interstage and deorbit it. You can see it's got loads of fuel left. I really did overspec this launcher vehicle. And I kind of had to. It was really hard to correctly spec this thing because of the size of what we were launching. It just required a 5-meter fairing and not necessarily a 5-meter rocket. So it was actually kind of hard to build this so that it wasn't completely overpowered. But that ended up working in our favor and stopped the mission from being a failure. But there we are. It's safely in orbit, watching a beautiful moon and Minmus rise, which takes us nicely back to the surface of Minmus to the crew of the Harvest, which are going to do a little hop over to a new biome to get some more science. Now, since this is continuing on from last season's playthrough, we have already collected a lot of the science from the surface of Minmus. So I had a biome map open and I was looking to see are there any I haven't been to and cross-referencing it with the archives in the research and development facility. We have actually been to every biome, but for the seismic scans and the gravity scans, we're actually missing data for, I think, pretty much all of them. So it doesn't really matter where we go. We can go anywhere and try and collect some data, but there was one biome I don't think I've got as much data from, and that is the slopes. And that's because the slopes are very hard to get data from, because as the name implies, it's very steep terrain and very hard to land on, but I was determined to do it, and I have no idea why, because you can see the profile of this rocket is incredibly tall. It doesn't really lend itself to landing on steep slopes, but I was going to give it a good try anyway. You can see there, we just pass over the slopes and I quickly fire up the rockets to make sure we don't overshoot. And we head down to what turns out to be extremely steep terrain. I mean, they definitely weren't kidding when they called them the slopes because, yeah, that's what it is, really. We should have packed like a toboggan or something. That might have been quite fun to do, although maybe the low gravity would make that quite slow. Anyway, you can see there, I try and put it down and we immediately start sledding down. Okay, I guess we didn't really need the toboggan in the end. And I thought this was going to be quite clever. Maybe I could drop the probe behind and then we'll land somewhere flatter, but I should have stopped moving before I did that. So there goes the probe tumbling down the slopes. That's probably really bad for the electronics and the equipment on that thing, but it does look quite funny rolling down the hillside there. Yeah, as I said, I should have used my engines to completely stop and like balance on the slopes and then drop it, and I would have had better chances. It may have still tumbled down anyway, who knows, but my last Hail Mary was to basically get out of movement range so that it would kind of unload, but I don't think I ended up going far enough. So then it would stop moving, I could go back, and hopefully it would be in one piece still, but yeah, I don't think I went far enough, but we land down here in the lowlands. It's still a little bit of a slope there, I guess, but, you know, one that this rocket could actually handle. Anyway, once the rocket is safely on the ground, Jebri comes and gets out, and yeah, fires up the EVA jetpack and goes to inspect whether the probe has survived that tumble down the hillside. And when we get over there, we can see it has stopped moving and it has conveniently landed in an upright position, which is very lucky because I was really worried this thing would end up like upside down or something, or on its side. It'd be hard to deploy the antenna. But once we make sure all the experiments are running, we head back up to see if we've got any data we can collect from the slopes. Unfortunately, no, I've actually collected the EVA reports and surface samples from there. And I wasn't able to take a piece of this rock either, which was a bit unfortunate. But I think either you have to be a scientist or there's some other requirement that I wasn't quite meeting. But anyway, once I realized I couldn't get any science, I thought, now it's time to do a bit of skydiving, except there's not really a sky here. I guess there's no atmosphere, so space diving. That sounds pretty cool. Yeah, so Jebri just does a big leap and free falls back to the Harvest. And look at him, he's having a whale of a time just dropping out of the sky above Minmus's lowlands. But now fun time's over, he's going to have to get back in the Harvest and prepare for the next leg of the mission to another biome to collect even more scientific data. So we're launching the first of our probes using a brand new space plane, the SSTO Antimony. I really need to stop building new ones. I think I built one last episode or the one before, and I was like, yes, this one will serve me well in future, and then I just go ahead and build a new one anyway. Yeah, I need to stop. It's just so addictive. I just love building space planes. But yes, anyway, this is delivering the first of our landers to Demeter, and I've decided to name all the landers, apart from the Seamoth, after Demeter's children. So this is the Persephone, yes, which is destined for the surface of Tylo. Now, you can see I've made a bit of a design error here. So one of the problems this plane had on testing was taking off. It was really hard to get the landing gear in a good orientation to actually have it take off before hitting the landing lights at the end of the runway. And so one of the ways I got it to tilt up more was by dragging the front landing gear back. And I never once considered to just open the cargo bay to see if that would ever be a problem. So yeah, we've got some weird hanging gear just yeah, hovering over the cargo bay, so that's something I will fix in the future. Anyway, here it is. This is Persephone. This is as I said, destined for the surface of Tylo, and so it's a pretty bulky lander. We've got an interstage there, so the idea is Demeter is going to park itself in sort of a middling orbit around Jool. I almost said Jupiter then. Yeah, around Jool, so that all the probes can easily get to their targets without having to require a massive interstage section. But I think they're all a little bit overbuilt anyway, just to be on the safe side. But yes. So actually landing on Tylo doesn't really require loads of power. Obviously, it requires a thrust-to-weight ratio of over 1, but I think we have achieved that. If the Kerbal engineer is to be believed, then yeah, we have achieved that. I had a bit of a problem trying to get this into the correct docking port because this one needs to go in the central docking port, and it kept wanting to dock to one of the outer ones there, you can see. So with just a bit of brute force and fiddling around, I finally managed to force it onto the correct docking port. So I should talk a little bit about the actual building of this interplanetary vessel. So because it's going to require quite a lot of fuel to get all the way out there, we're going to send all the probes up here because those probes are, precious and hard to build, so that needs to be done in a breathable atmosphere. But as for the drive stage, that's going to be done in lunar orbit, and once we've got our probes onto the upper section of Demeter, we'll give it a little interstage to get it out to the moon, and we'll dock it up to the main drive module out there, and then it will launch from either like lunar orbit or just some like high orbit around Kerbin. Anyway, now it's time to return the SSTO Antimony, or Antimony, I'm not sure which one. I'm sticking with the main theme of naming my cargo space planes after cool elements. And antimony is it's a pretty interesting element. I'm just looking it up, and it says it has been known to ancient history, used in medicine. So that's pretty interesting. It's also good, fireproofing material. And I remember learning a bit about it in my semiconductors course that I've just done. But not loads. That was quite a difficult course. Anyway, yes, let's actually talk about the space plane. It's pretty good, actually. I said I had a bit of a problem with the landing gear. That's something that I'll address a little bit later on. But other than that, it flies really well. I really like the wing design of this. I kind of wanted overarching wings, which is why the cargo bay opens from the bottom rather than the top. It just makes it feel like like a military plane or something like that. But and I really like the tail plane as well. I think the profile of this one is pretty cool. It uses 6 of those Cutlass dual mode engines, which I used on the Sparrow in the last episode. They're pretty good, actually. I think this space plane does struggle a little bit because of those engines. Really, it could do with 4 of them. And I think that would help it fly a little bit better. As it stands, it just about managed to get into orbit. You can see we've not really got much fuel left at all. So anything heavier than this and it won't be able to take that into orbit, which is something I'd like to fix if I ever stick to reusing space planes that I've built before rather than just building a brand new one every time. But yeah, anyway, you can see as a classic fashion, I've overshot the Kerbal Space Center, so we're going to have to do a big hairpin maneuver to bring ourselves back. Not that I'm too sad, because we're coming over a beautiful sunset and all of those clouds are looking magnificent. So at least we get gorgeous vistas while we yeah, embarrassingly turn around and go back to the runway. I mean, at this point, it's not really embarrassing because it's pretty much par for the course. If I ever don't overshoot the runway, something's probably gone wrong, right? Because, well, I always overshoot the runway. After that big turn, we really didn't have much energy left, so I just fire up the engines one more time just to give us that little bit of boosting that we can glide back to the runway. As always, I try and make my space planes glide quite well, and this one's no exception. It does pretty well, actually, all things considered. Normally, you want the wings at the bottom and angled slightly upwards. That does help. So this thing does, you know, surprisingly well, considering I didn't really focus too much on the best wing profile for a gliding space plane. But yeah, here we are coming in at the runway. I preemptively upped the brakes this time because I didn't want to crash towards the end like I did last episode, and yeah, we slowed down it remarkably quickly. And as I was trying to take some nice cinematics of it landed at the runway, my game crashed, which was excellent, but luckily when I reloaded the game, it was still sat on the runway, so we didn't lose the whole mission. Yeah, I think I may have overmodded this game now. It's a little bit unstable. Anyway, yes, we're coming back to the harvest for one more jaunt. Well, actually, I say one more. Two more jaunts across the surface. So we're now leaving the lowlands and heading over to yet another biome. I realized I thought I had forgotten to drop the probe at the lowlands, but the one that tumbled down the hillside ended up outside of the slopes biome. So we actually ended up not getting that science. So maybe we'll have to try and again. I might not go back to the slopes, save myself the embarrassment of doing that a second time. So we're coming up to the flats here. Something, yeah, nice and flat, as the name suggests. There's no toppling over going to be happening here unless I really biff the landing. But in Minmus's low gravity, that's pretty much impossible to do. Once we're down on the surface, we deploy those splendid arms and drop one of the probes so that we can gather as much science as possible. Once again, as is the case in every biome, we're only able to gather the seismic and gravitometer experiments. Everything else has been done. But yeah, Jebbery gets out, sets up the probe, makes sure it's able to communicate back with Kerbin. I realize that we haven't got good communications on Minmus. It's probably a good idea to put a couple communication satellites out here as well. I don't know, maybe it's not completely necessary, but it would certainly speed up the transmission. I've noticed it's taking a long time to send the science back, and that's just because when we're facing away from Kerbin, we don't always have good connection. Even with the Porsche network, when those new polar satellites that we've launched, there's still dead spots in our system. So maybe we're going to have to go and fix that. But yeah, anyway, I've just bolted through the deployment of the surface science just because we've seen that already. There's nothing really too special about that. We're just going to collect some more science. Try and do the EVA experiment. But yeah, I've done that in pretty much every biome already. So we actually don't get any science from that, unfortunately. So we pack it back away. Luckily, it doesn't use the experiment unless you keep the data. Somehow the golf ball, I guess, teleports back into the case. I'm not too sure, really. I tried to stow the arms, but I accidentally left the brakes on some of it. So sometimes with these parts, if they're moving, it won't let you lock the motor or the servo, which is annoying because then some of them will lock and some of them won't. And then when I tuck them away, yeah, they don't all move in unison like I want them to. Anyway, yes, now we are jumping over to the next biome, and I'm heading north because I want to eventually reach the poles as well. I always like going to the poles biome. I think it's because the way Kerbal Space Program maps planets using the PQS system? I can't remember what it's called now. It means that the terrain gets quite exaggerated near the poles, so you end up with better mountains there. And I just love mountains. It's kind of, I don't know, they're my favorite geological feature. If anyone else has one of those, yeah, go on, drop it in the comments if you have a favorite geological feature and what it is. Yeah, keen to hear it. Mine's mountains. Anyway, here we are. We stop at the Midlands because that's somewhere we haven't been yet with the harvest. So we're just going to come down here, drop yet another probe down. We'll probably keep the surface science for stuff like the poles. Not that it really matters where we do them. I don't know if I have done any surface experiments on Minmus before. I'm going to have to go back through the archives and have a look at the earlier season of Kerbal Space Program to see if I have done that. But yeah, I don't think I have, so it doesn't really matter. Here we are just deploying the next probe. You can see I'm doing one from each side. I mean, they're so light, it doesn't really matter, but it's just to keep the ship balanced when it flies. I don't want to have it be slightly unbalanced. But not that it matters. We've got plenty of SAS, and these things are so light. It's not really going to make much of a difference, but it's good practice to do in principle anyway. But there we are. We're going to check back in with the harvest in the next episode where we'll do a few more jaunts. For now, we've got one more probe to deliver to Demeter. And since using the antimony, and I was thinking, oh, I should really use the space planes I've already built, I'm using the thorium because I said I was going to keep using it, so I am going to. So here we are, using the thorium. Now, you might have seen as we were taking off there, it was kicking up a load of dust behind it, and that's because I've installed a new mod, and I can't remember what the name of the mod is at all. I will have to double check, and I'll let you know I'll put it in the description. The mod list, by the way, is always linked in the description. I always link a link to the post where I show the mod list. I will update that post as well to reflect the mod that I've added, which adds a bunch of new wheels and landing gear and cool caterpillar tracks, which I want to try on some of the probes at some point. But yeah, I was doing that because the large landing gear are absolutely infuriating to use from the stock game. They just slide around and they don't work very well, especially the extra large landing gear. So I thought, I'm done with it now. I'm going to install a mod that's going to replace them. So that's, yeah, what I did. So the launch was pretty uneventful. Space planes tend to be. They fly themselves very well, especially the Thorium with its massive wingspan. Yeah, we didn't have any problems. So here we are dropping off. I think, yes, this is Arion. This one is destined for Pol, I think, or Val, one or the other. I think I'm going to go to Pol instead of Bop because Bop is on a bit of an inclined orbit. Pol's just going to be a little bit easier to get to. Or is it the other way around? I can't remember now. Whichever one's the least inclined is the one I'm going to be going to. You know, I've been playing this game since before it came out, and I still don't know something like that, so I should really. Oh well, anyway, here we are pulling up for the docking procedure, and it went pretty uneventful. You can see there the glowing, ominous red light on the side of this probe, as well as the Persephone. And I've put this on Plutos as well, so this is the MechJeb piece. And the reason I've put that on there is not necessarily so this thing can fly autonomously or anything like that. It's because you can only have 2 unmanned experiments on the probe, but the MechJeb also has slots for 2 unmanned experiments. So in combination, I can have all 4 unmanned experiments to get even more science, as I keep saying over and over again. But yeah, like I said, that docking was very easy. And well, this is one step closer to getting to Jool. With that docking out of the way, we return back to the Thorium and head back home. Now, the Thorium, I've used the big S flaps, the elevons at the back, and that's very handy for takeoff and also for re-entry. So we have a huge adjustable wing surface, essentially, to control our attitude with, which lets us pitch up quite aggressively on re-entry, which helps us brake a lot more effectively. But it's not so good when flying in the atmosphere and you want finer controls, because like I said, they are big. So yeah, one little tap of those and you yank the nose up or down or whichever way. So I think I want to try, if it's possible, to have some action groups that toggle how much you're able to pitch with it. That way, when we're taking off and when we're re-entering, we can full range of motion for them for the maximum control, but then when we're actually in atmospheric flight, then we can turn that down so that we can do little adjustments. And I say this because this actually did come and cause a problem on the landing. So re-entry went absolutely fine. There was nothing wrong. Like I said, those big flaps are actually very handy in re-entry, especially for someone like me who overshoots the runway. I can basically belly flop through the atmosphere and make sure that we hit our target. It was when we came down for our landing. I thought I had everything really well lined up, and I was looking at this like, we're a little fast, but you know, we've got a drogue chutes and heavy brakes, so this should be fine, really. But no, unfortunately, like I said, these big flaps, they provide way too much pitch authority. So when I go to flare to make sure that we don't crash into the runway, I end up pitching up way too hard and glide along the runway. And I'm like, oh god, here we go, smack that toga switch, take off and go around. Because otherwise we're not going to make it on the runway. So you have to basically do a go around and try that landing again. Luckily, we've got so much fuel on this thing that is not really much of a problem. Imagine if we didn't have enough fuel for a toga. That would probably be quite bad. I mean, maybe we could put it down in the ocean, who knows. And luckily, we're not actually risking any Kerbals. You'll notice that this is being flown autonomously. Something with not a lot of precedent in real life. I know the Buran was flown autonomously, and that's actually quite remarkable that a spaceplane flies itself. I think these days it's probably a lot more feasible, but these days spaceplanes aren't really the go-to because they're just not as cost-effective as regular rockets. Anyway, here we are. This time, we make our landing, we don't flare too much, and we come to a nice stop at the middle of the runway. And with that, the construction of Demeter is well underway, and we will continue with that in the next episode, because unfortunately that's all I've got time for today. Thank you very much for watching, and also thank you very much for waiting patiently for this episode. I know it's been a long time since the last one. Like I said, exam season just keeps me so busy. I've basically lived in the library for the last month or so. Because as it turns out, third year physics is incredibly difficult. Who would have thought about that? I had a statistical mechanics exam that I was absolutely terrified for. Luckily, it went well. All my exams went pretty well, so I can relax and play some Kerbal Space Program now. It might be a bit of time between this episode and the next one, just because I am also going on holiday, and then when I come back from holiday, I begin a new internship. Yes, another one, and it is actually also with the United Kingdom Atomic Energy Authority. Again, this time it's not going to be so computer-based. It's going to be a bit more hands-on, which I'm very excited for. But yeah, so I will try and find time to make the next episode. I've got the footage, so it just needs to be put together. Anyway, with my life update out of the way, thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the episode, please consider leaving a like and maybe even subscribing to the channel. And if you want to check out older episodes of Beyond Horizons, you can have a look on screen now, and some should be recommended to you. Yeah, thank you very much for watching again, and I've been Moonfish1001, and I will see you in the next video.